So we're going to learn how to use Adobe Animate CC. This is going to be one of the two options for project number 4. The easiest of our 5 projects, actually, in the sense that we're just creating an individual piece of art or segment for a website. Adobe Animate CC, by its name, indicates that it's for animation, right? So it's really for animation for the web. The type of document we're going to create is called an HTML5 canvas. There's an element introduced in HTML5 called a canvas that allows things to happen inside. It's kind of like a container or a stage upon which things can happen, and it masks out anything that's happening on the outside. And so we use that for creating animation and stuff like that. So I'll choose HTML5 canvas, and I get this appearance here. I've got my canvas up here. I can go and show my ruler and see how big it is, been created by default. I have control over that, modifying the document. I can modify the size of the canvas if I wanted to. Stage color, frame rate. So we're going to learn some basics of animation here. And we're going to use that as the basis of you guys using this or using P5.js for your project number 4. If I go to modify document, you'll notice that I have some dimensions here. I have width and height. I also have stage color, and I have a frame rate. So frame rate refers to the number of frames per second that the document or canvas will be playing at. So the default is 24. And the reason it's 24 is 24 is the frame rate at which motion picture film plays back. So when you go to movies, it's 24 frames per second you're seeing in front of you. It's not actually a continuous image. Your mind, the optics of your optic nerve, gives you the illusion that it's actually a continuous image. You're actually seeing 24 different frames every second. It used to be a film strip that would go by. Now most movies are projected digitally, so you have digital projection coming up to 24 frames a second. We have something, a phenomenon called persistence of vision, in which our mind holds on to an image slightly longer than it appears in front of us. So that overlap between the image you see before and the image you see after creates an illusion of continuous motion. So even though it's cycling in front of your eyes, you just don't notice that it's moving. And that's what gives us the power of animation. If we just keep changing the image fast enough, and we have the drawings or graphics that are fluidly changing between them, we think it's real, or we think it at least is continuously happening in front of us. For the most part, you can just leave it at 24 frames a second because that's the most pleasing motion. If you would change it for reasons of your processing power was low, takes more processing power to run more frames per second, or also if you want super fast incremental animation, where lots of things are changing at a really fast rate, you could up it to a really high frame rate to have more precise, incredibly fast motion. All right. So our toolbox is on the right here. I have no idea why. Very arbitrarily, they put it there, just to be different, I guess. I like to switch back to classic mode to get my toolbox on the left, because every single application in the world has a toolbox on the left. For whatever reason, Adobe wanted to charge for their upgrade, so they put it on the right. I said, oh, that's a feature change. So I switch it back to that. I go to Window, Workspace, Classic, and it puts my toolbox on the right there, on the left. All right, so we're going to learn how to create some animation here. I'm going to start with a classic exercise called the bouncing ball. Use this oval tool. I have my fill down here. I can set. I have a stroke. I can also set. So my fill is red, my stroke is black. And I'll change it to object drawing there. This button, this toggle button. and then I'll just create a shape. And I can move that shape around. And I'm moving it, but I'm not animating it. I animate it by telling the application to hold it at one place in time and then move it to another. This is our timeline up here. The timeline represents, has anybody animated before? Made anything animate? Okay, good. Has anybody not animated before? And that's okay. That would be my expectation that most of you have not animated. So animation is really changing the properties of an object over time. The word animate comes from the Greek word anime, which means to bring to life. And we're giving life to these shapes in this case. Sometimes you draw, sometimes you use shapes, but you're changing the properties over time. So I want to make this ball bounce, and it has to be a certain kind of shape or object for me to work with it. So I'm going to go up here and say create motion tween. I'm going to right click in my first frame there, create motion tween. It's going to say the selected item cannot be tweened. You must convert this to a symbol in order to tween. Do you want to convert? And I say yes, okay. I do want to convert. So it becomes a symbol in my library there, symbol 1. Now it's ready to animate. But you notice that it's now stretched. It exists in 24 frames. So that means its existence is 1 second. From frame 1 to frame 24, it now exists. And how I change it over that time period is how it will move. So if it's 24 frames in its existence, how many seconds is that? Right now, how many seconds is 24 frames? 1 second, exactly, because we have 24 frames per second. So I figured my animation is going to need to take about 3 seconds to occur, maybe 4 seconds. So that's 96 frames. 4 times 24 is 96. So I can stretch out my bar there to 96 frames. And what I'll do is I'll have the last frame selected, just that last frame there. And let me explain that again. Start from the beginning. When I've created this, I'm going to right-click. I'm selected in the timeline there. Just click on it once, and then right-click and say Create Motion Tween. And then I will expand it to 96 frames. Now I'm going to move it from the left to the right. I'm selecting just that last frame in the timeline there and moving it from left to right. And so it'll be a very slow movement now. I'll hit the play button that's right here, and it'll move slowly over 4 seconds. So that's a very slow movement. See if you can get that to work. And this is called setting a keyframe. So we set 2 keyframes. There's a keyframe in the first frame by default, and then we set a second keyframe on the last frame, and the computer animates it between the 2 keyframes. Each one of these dots here, by the way, represents a frame. And the reason they're called keyframes comes from classical animation language. Walt Disney innovators in animation, animation studios. We did not invent animation, but certainly we big influence in it. When the animation studios came to be, there would be key animators, would be really skilled artists who drew really beautiful frames of the main action. most. And then there were lesser paid, lesser skilled animators called the in-betweeners, who would draw all the in-between frames of the animation. So in the computer, you are the key animator. You're making the keyframes, and the computer is the in-betweener, drawing all the frames in between for you to create the motion. And that's why it's called a motion tween, because it's creating this tween animation for you. Now, that's our animation. So what we want to do is we want to make a bounce, right? We want to make a bounce at frame 24, about 1 second right there. So I'm going to click right around 24, and I'm going to drag it down so it hits a bounce for the first try. And then I am going to go up a bit. And let's say 48 be the second time it bounces. It'll be a second hit. But somewhere in between there, it'll be a bounce. So I'll go back and move it up. So each time I move up, it automatically adds a keyframe for me. Every time I move it in the time, when I reposition the timeline, it'll move up. And then maybe by the time, no, maybe 4 seconds is a bit much to do it. Just animate it off in the 3rd second. So that would be 48. And add 24 to that is 72, right? And I'll just get it off. Get off the screen right there. And make it down a little bit. So that'll be off by the 3rd second, and then maybe in the middle of that, it'll have a slightly less bounce, because it's losing energy, so it's not going to bounce as high. Now, if I play this back, I'm going to see it's a little unnatural, right? Like a ball does not move on these straight line movements, right? So the animation itself is a little unreal. And I don't even need this like part right there, so I could really just get rid of those frames and leave it at that. So Flash does have a really nice feature for me, which allows me to make these bounces look a little more realistic. So I can create motion curves or curves on these lines, these paths, so they actually appear curved. Because a ball doesn't go straight in a line, it moves in a curved motion. And I will fix these curves so they move smoothly across those lines. And I can reposition these dots. Just be careful you don't mess them too much. They might lose their smoothness. So now I'll play it back again and I get a more realistic bounce of the ball. Because they're following curved motion.
We're going to do the
Motion graph?
the graph that allows you to edit the curves like the actual.
Yeah, I don't need to do that for this. I might use it for other things, but not for this. So now, the other thing, and that might be advanced just yet for this group. The next thing I want to do to add a little more life to it is I want to use what's called squash and stretch, which is a classic animation technique that suggests when something flies to another object, it squashes a bit, and when it elevates or moves, accelerates, it stretches a bit. So it's going to hit here, and it's going to squash a bit, but I want it to animate or squash around its bottom point. So I need to modify it a bit. So I'm going to switch tools into the free transform tool, which is the third one down. And when I have the free transform tool on, it actually gives this little cage around it. It allows me to modify some of the parameters of it. So I can rotate it, I can squat, I can squeeze it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to change the center point or the pivot point. So with the with the circle selected and the free transform tool selected, I'm going to move that center point down. With this little dot in the center, it's called the center point. Yes.
How do you do free transform?
It's this third selector down there.
Q.
Q, yeah. With the Q key. Click on it. That center point, I can move it down to the bottom there. And what that does is allows me to animate around that pivot point, so it'll squash based on that. It won't like collapse into the middle. It'll squash to the bottom. It's a more realistic squash. And then when it comes up, it'll move. I'll stretch it. Moves down. Squash it. And I'll squash it a little less on the second one because it's losing energy. So, and maybe in the middle there, I won't let it squash just yet, and I might animate it on the curve like that. And let it roll. So now bounces. And it's a little more realistic. Second hit. Command return and preview it in the browser. And so you see that the canvas is actually cut off based on the size of the canvas, 550 or 6, whatever it is. 550 pixels wide by 400 high. It's pretty cool. Okay, so we can also bring in sound to add another dimension. So I'll import to library. In week 11, under lessons, week 11, we have a file called bounce.wave. And that's a bouncing ball sound. So I want to import that to my library in Adobe Animate. Import to library. And again, it is in R3812 lessons week 11, which we're in. Believe it or not, it's week 11. Seems like the semester just started. So now the question becomes, okay, how do I add sound to this? I can add a layer by hitting this icon there, new layer, and then sound. And then each time the ball bounces, I want to add a, I'll say insert blank keyframe in that. So let me back up a bit. To add sounds, we need to have an event in the timeline that says do something. So I'll create a new layer, I'll call it sound, and then every time that ball, the ball hits in the timeline here and here, I want that sound to play. So in that sound layer, I'll select that same frame above it, and that same layer above that's frame 24, and I'll choose insert blank keyframe. So when it's a blank keyframe, it allows me to insert a change of some kind. So I will select that with my blank keyframe, go to properties, and then go to sound, and then choose bounce.wave. And we'll see that that sound actually shows a little waveform there. And I don't think it'll play. It does, yes. So it plays like that. So I need to repeat that for the second bounce. So my second bounce occurs at frame 48. I'll insert a blank keyframe there. That's insert blank keyframe. And then selecting that blank keyframe, going to the properties panel over here. I choose bounce.wave. And then I will play one more time. Okay, command return. I'm sure what that is. Okay. I want to go ahead and save it as an Adobe FLA document. Okay. So you can do things like add images to this, right? So I might take something like this, and I will save the image to my folder. And that's pretty cool. Save this image as. Saving my background image, and I can add this image. I'll create a new layer for it. Call it image. I'll drag it down, and I'll import that. I'll import directly to the stage. just saved. Gotta make sure I have the .jpeg extension on it, otherwise it won't be recognized. Scale it up a bit. Now here's an interesting thing, right? So I've got this symbol, right? So the symbol is the ball itself. The symbol really represents what it is, right? So I can edit it, you know, doing things like change its color. The symbol is really like an instance of a piece of artwork, so you can repeat it. Draw on it, make changes to it. So for example, I could do things like add some elements to it. I'll up the value there. And maybe do a little bit of curve. What's up with that? Move this into place. So now if I go back onto the scene, it's updated and kind of looks like a basketball. Go back and add more to it. Do it again. Not sure what's up with that sound, but not very good. and you'll see it crops off the image at the edge of the canvas. Let's leave our artwork there. Okay, so here's some examples of people who have done Flash animations or Adobe animations. That's their project. There's one. That's what this guy did. Those guys are all doing a example. Let's see.
So,
Yes.
so for our project 4, we can pretty much use any prompt that we choose.
Correct. I'm going to show you something that might inspire you a little further. Okay.
Is there a certain length you'd like it to be?
Hmm?
Is there a certain length you'd like it to be?
Nope. It can be pretty short. So let's look at another type of animation. So that was quick keyframe animation. That is one type of animation. So like things you could do is bring in multiple images. You can animate images. You can animate people going across. There's also a hand-drawn type animation that you could do. So let's look at how we might accomplish that. I'm going to save this and create a new HTML5 canvas. So you don't have to follow along for this part. I'm going to show you something really quick. So I'm going to use this brush tool, paintbrush tool, and I'm going to paint with black. And I'm going to look at my smooth and then the size of my brush. Let's see. This brush. And brush size is there. That's how you create a brush. So I have something called onion skinning. I could turn that on. So there's a little switch here. There, for all it says onion skin. Click that on. And that allows me to see what I've drawn before. And then I have I have insert timeline frame and keyframe and blank keyframe. Now, despite the fact it's not shown here, you actually do have quick keys for keyframe and blank keyframe. There are F6 and F7. So I'll double check my keyboard settings here to see my keyboard that it's using function keys. So I'll hit use F1, F2. Again, go to Apple, System Preferences, Keyboard, and I'll click, say, use F1, F2 as standard function key. So I click on that, then I've got these quick keys for myself to use. So basically, I'm going to draw a quick line like that, organic shape, and I'm going to hit F7 to advance one and add a blank keyframe. So that goes away. And you think about our squash and stretch rule from before, I'm making this organic shape as if it is kind of like moving fast and stretching out, and I'll make it hit this wall edge, and as if it's running into a barrier, and then flipping around, and then going back that way. And then back around. Now make it go in a circle. I'm hitting F7, and the onion skin is allowing me to see previous drawings. That's what this setting is doing. And the reason it's called onion skinning is that classical animators used to draw on onion skin paper. If you know what an onion skin looks like, it's kind of translucent. And so they would draw on onion skin paper so they could see their previous drawings that allowed them to animate things by seeing what they had drawn before using a light box and onion skin paper. So now I'll just play this back. I drew about 30 frames. So as you can see, I go like that. And I can knock the frame rate down to 12, so it'll go a little slower, and play it that way. And you can see that it's a little bit smooth, and I can keep drawing. And my hand-drawn efforts are what they are, right? And I could continue on that path. Okay. So this is a way of hand drawing animation so that it is very organic, and it's good for organic type of things, things that are not consistently shaped, especially when you're not like a superstar animation artist who they do these things for years, right? So, but it's a lot of fun to do these types of things. There's great hand-drawn animation apps for the iPad. You might want to try out, but this is a really cool thing to try. So one of the next exercises I like to do is to animate from a letter of the alphabet and have it metamorphosize into an object whose word begins with that letter. So we saw some examples there. B for butterfly and A for apple, you name it. So let's say in this example, we start with a letter T. In a timeline. And rather than hitting F7 to make it go away, I'll hit F6 to keep it there and then modify it. So I'll do things like maybe erase parts of it. And we could do things like shrink down our thing. And then add our color. Let them grow incrementally. And maybe have it hang there a little longer. So F6 allows me to hold it So that's an example of the metamorphosis. Given a little more time, you can increment it. Any one of these types of artwork, flash animation shapes, hand-drawn flash animation, or Adobe animation, P5.js artwork, drawn, animated, interactive, or otherwise.
like some of the projects and the animation.
Well, you have to deliver it in a web page, right? So, good question. And that's really easy. I mean, super easy. So, how you package this is it's an HTML5 canvas that you'll be packaging. But if you just export, go to Publish Settings, and you have the Publish setting as JavaScript HTML, and it exports assets for you the following way. All you do is if you've saved it, and then you go to File, after I finish saving, File Publish, it will generate all the assets for you. And you can take them and incorporate them for your upload, because you're going to have to use GitHub to upload it, right? So I got our students, Professor Mike. The lab up here. It's my tree metamorphosis. So it generates the following three files. This is my source file. Source file, which is the flaw. I don't need that to publish. But I've got this metamorphosis.html, which is the container, and then I've got tree metamorphosis.js JavaScript. If I open that in Dreamweaver, I will see that it is just this live canvas being played. So it's a JavaScript function. And there's a canvas that's created right here. If I select, you'll see the size of it. It's 550 by 400. So you can style this, right? You can style this page to center the object, etc., etc. So let's see. Sure, we're live. I think it's not showing up.